Okay, so good afternoon again. Welcome to Local Stories with Amersham Museum, which is our online programme which tells the story of local people and places. And this month, for September, our topic is shopping. It's something we know that people really love to reminisce about and tell us about their stories of how they remember the shops used to be in the local area. But we're also doing a project at the moment supported by the Heritage Fund and let's let someone else in, and through the Amersham Community Board to look at how people shopped in the past and to support our premise that maybe shopping was more, the way we shop was more sustainable in the past than it is today, and the way we didn't waste anything and we recycled everything. So we're doing lots of talking to people about how they remember shopping and shops. And it's been a really interesting process. So we thought we would share with you a little of what we know today, and we're hoping that you might share a little bit back with us. We've got the format for this afternoon. So we've got a special guest, Simon Card, who's going to tell us about his memories as a trainee at Sainsbury's in Amersham. And then we've got Alison, who's going to do a little bit about some of the architectural details of shops in Amersham on the Hill, things you might not have noticed before. And then I've got some pictures from the archive to show you at the end, particularly some lovely ones that we were donated not long before lockdown of Amersham, Old Amersham and Little Chalfont in the 1960s of the shops, which I thought you might enjoy seeing. But we really would like today to be, a conversation. So if you've got a story to share from something someone says, we'd really love to hear it. So we're going to start with Simon. So as I mentioned, Simon, we got in touch with him through Peter Healy, and they've known each other for a very long time. And Peter knew we were doing this project, and he said, "Oh, Simon is the person to talk to." Simon was an A-level trainee for Sainsbury's in 1967. So welcome, Simon.
Thank you, Emma.
Could you perhaps tell us, to start with, just a little bit about how you became a trainee on the Sainsbury's scheme?
Absolutely. Can I first of all say hello to Graham and Jill, who I know very well, who are on your panel. Graham and Jill, I promise not to give any secrets away of our times in past Amersham days. Yes, it started. I was brought up. I was born in England, but I was brought up in Edinburgh. And my father worked for a company called Nielsen's, which is a marketing research company, and they did marketing research into all retail outlets. And so I knew a little bit about the retail business, if you like. And although Sainsbury's weren't available north of the border, they were very much a southern retail outlet. And I discussed it with my father and said, yes, Sainsbury's is a really good company. Do you want to apply for them? So I did, and I applied for them on this, and they sent me this brochure, which is Sainsbury's A-level trainee program, and you send off, and then you have an amazing training program with Sainsbury's. They had the most remarkable training department. And first of all, you have to spend time, induction time, training in Blackfriars in the headquarters, and then you're seconded to a shop. In those days, of course, there were a few supermarkets around, and they were growing enormously. Sainsbury's was certainly one of the really large and important developers of supermarkets in the UK. But they had a few counter service shops still left, and they said to me, right, you'll be allocated to a shop somewhere in and around London. Where would you like to go? And I said, I don't know. I knew and heard of Kingston. I had friends down there. So I said, Kingston. I said, okay. And they said, well, you're going to Amersham. So that's how it started. And I do remember almost as clearly as day that walk from the station up Hill Avenue to Sainsbury's with my old tatty old suitcase, heading towards the hostel. Because Sainsbury's in those days had hostels. I don't know whether they do now, probably not. But you were allocated a hostel, and this hostel was above the shop. And it was like home from home. You had a housekeeper, and I can't remember her name now, I wish I could, a married lady, and an assistant housekeeper. And everything was branded Sainsbury's. In fact, I have here 2 Sainsbury's spoons from the shop. You can't see that, but that's a Sainsbury's spoon from the shop. It's got J. Sainsbury on it, just in case you pinched it. I must have given them back at some stage to the business. But the hostels were fantastic because they were above the shop. You didn't have to travel very far, and you entered into the shop. I did initial training in Blackfriars in Stamford House, which is where the head office of Sainsbury's was. Then they sent me out on the 16th of October, 1967, to Amersham. And many happy memories of Amersham in those days. And we lived in and around Amersham until about 11 years ago when we moved down to Devon for a lifestyle change to run a bed and breakfast. That was exciting. And so we did that for 5 years down here. But most of our time has been spent in Amersham. My wife, Mary, lived in Amersham for most of her life and knew it very well, and probably much better than I did. I spent about a year in the shop itself under the manager, Mr. Chapman. Mr. Chapman was a remarkable man, lovely guy, who was immaculate, who took real pride in what he did for the shop. He was also, I think, the chief fire officer in the volunteer fire brigade in Amersham. And Mr. Minari, I think, was his number 2. And so that's how it all came about. And I had no idea what I was going to expect. But when I got there, I was received really well and looked after really well. And Sainsbury's had a little black book which had everything you had to do in it. So if you want to know how to sneeze, you looked up page 427, and this is how to sneeze with Sainsbury's. And it was extraordinary. They had detailed everything you had to do. Sadly, I don't have that black book, but if you can get hold of a record of it, it is remarkable. Everything was documented that you had to do. So when you went on a training course, for example, they told you this is the list of directors. So you had a list of directors, and those are the people you had to bow down to. That's a list of the depots and such forth. So everything was given to you, so you knew the background of the company itself. So I spent some time training. I learned to be trained to be a butcher for a while, because as an A-level trainee, you have to learn everything within the store itself. So I learned how to pat butter. In those days, we patted butter. It became pre-packed after a while, but you had to actually learn how to pat butter. You had to learn how to bone out a side of bacon. And my love of food has always been with me, but this was great for somebody who does love food and enjoys cooking and preparing food. And then you trained as a butcher. When I trained as a butcher, I did a lot of training up in Blackfriars in London, where they had their training centre. I remember cutting my thumb. I still have a scar to this day on my thumb whilst training and boning out a side of bacon. No, it wasn't. It was a side of beef. I beg your pardon. And I was whisked off to St Thomas's Hospital to have that prepared. And got told by the trainer that I shouldn't have done it, and I should have held the knife this way and not done the other road. So they were very strict about how you trained, and rightly so. Back at the store, the butcher was Mr. Stan Hildreth, I think, and John Meffam was his assistant. And they were really very good. Stan Hildreth was a sort of rather nice bespectacled round man, looked like a butcher and was a butcher. Wonderful character. The store itself was, I think, described in other articles that you put up on the museum, tiled, both down to the front, and also we had sawdust on the floor in the black and white cars that we had in those days. The other thing was that over the counters, we had these plastic covers. And I remember one day, a lady wanted to see a piece of tripe. So I picked it up on 2 forks, and I showed it to her above the counter, which was probably the wrong thing to do, because the piece of tripe slid off my forks, slid down the rather curved cover on the thing, and slid across the floor, and ended up at Mr. Chapman's feet. I was then summoned to see Mr. Chapman and told this was not the proper way to serve tripe to customers. The other things that we sold in those days were lots of rabbit. We sold lots of English rabbit when it came in the store, but Chinese rabbit was a very popular dish as well. We had to learn how to cut cheese and serve cheese and be knowledgeable about the cheeses that they served as well. So there was a full program of how to serve the customer. The customer was absolutely always top of the list as far as care and concern was concerned. So they had chairs down the side of the counters, and the customers could sit and wait a while if they wanted to. Mr. Chapman was always there for a discussion and a conversation at the front door or at the back, and he kept an eye on the shop immaculately. You had to dress in those days. Are you all right with us going on to the talk about?
The only thing, Simon, I'd say is just some people might not know where Sainsbury's was. I wondered if you could just say that, and maybe just also, I've never known what the exact layout of the shop was, how many counters there were, and I know they served meat and dairy, but did they sell anything else? It'd be good just to kind of have a picture of what the shop looked like as inside.
It was a long shop, and they had the butcher department down at the bottom, and they changed it around from time to time. So it was a really long shop. At the end, there was a counter where in the old days they used to take the money, so the money wasn't taken over the counters themselves. And the tiles in the shops at the bottom were really, really spectacular, very, very good. They had canned goods on one side, and fresh meat and poultry and cooked meats on the other side as well, and the butchery department also. So it was a sort of one-stop shop, and the layout of the shop, you had all the staff behind the counters, of course, apart from managers who were in front of the store, in front of the counters themselves. And there was only one way in and one way out, and say Mr. Chapman made sure that you were looked after if anything went wrong at all. But they really looked after their customers, and if an older person came in, they made sure that they had a seat if they wanted to, and looked after them like that. So they served everything in those days, and were quite innovative in some of the products they served. I remember being seconded once to Chelsea branch for some reason or other, just for a bit of more training, I suppose. And so Chelsea branch was the only branch in Sainsbury's that served caviar. The only reason they served caviar was because Simon Sainsbury lived about 2 doors down from the branch, and he wanted his caviar close by, got it from the branch. We didn't serve caviar in Sainsbury's in Amersham, as far as I remember. But a lot of other canned goods as well, and a lot of the own brand canned goods with the Sainsbury label on were on display. The own label marketing from Sainsbury's in those days was quite incredible. The store itself, going back to your initial point, Emily, was by the crossing on the in the High Street. Mm-hmm. And opposite was sort of Brownings and other shops like that.
Did I mentioned at the beginning our project about sustainability. How were things packaged, and how were they packaged?
Everything was in paper bags. There was no plastic at all. Plastic came in with the supermarkets really, and the packaging of that. I only spent 3.5 years with Sainsbury's, so I feel slightly fraudulent about talking about them in great depth. But they were very keen on wrapping in paper bags and in greaseproof paper. We went through a lot of greaseproof paper. Of course, in those days, a lot of shoppers had their own bags with them anyway, or their baskets, and therefore they didn't need to have any plastic wrapping. And the vegetables were served directly into the basket, or the cheese and the butter was wrapped and then delivered into the customer's basket as they wanted it. So there was no plastic in any great shape or form, certainly when I was there in the late 1960s.
Did you offer home delivery?
Sorry?
Did they offer home delivery?
Not as far as I remember. I think from time to time, if they would do it on a personal basis. So if you wanted to, if somebody they knew had a problem with delivery, one of the managers would be sent out or something to deliver. But they didn't have a specific, not at our branch anyway, specific delivery program for shoppers.
No. Shall I show some of the pictures? Simon donated a few things to the museum. So the price list from when he worked at Sainsbury's, and a few other bits from a roast chicken label, a few other bits, but also some really lovely photographs that I believe you took from your hostel window. So I'm going to share those now, and perhaps you can talk us through. Oops. Hang on, I'll go up. Can everyone see those?
Yep.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can tell us a little bit, point out where Sainsbury's is or anything you remember about the other shops nearby.
Yes, Sarah and other shops like that. Oh gosh, that takes me back, doesn't it? yes, of course, you could easily park in the high street there. So a lot of customers were able to, drop the shopping off or drop their pick their shopping up from the car itself and shop out, drop the car outside the shop. We had a blind as well, because a lot of the goods in the shop window on the display would get quite strong sunlight. So they did decide to have this blind outside the store, which was put up and down on a fairly rapid basis if the sun shone or didn't shine at the same time. The hostel is above those 2 floors above for the hostel itself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they were fully equipped. I can't remember the total number of people we had there, but I think it was about 6 or 7 when I was there. A good friend of ours who sadly died a year or so back, Ian Herbertson, was also an A-level trainee with me. And I've got a photograph of him outside I don't know whether you see that, but that's outside in my car called Basil. And that was when the snow was on the ground, and that was the back of Sainsbury's store in Chiltern Parade, where all the deliveries were made by the delivery vans. The delivery vans were quite big, but they weren't as big as they are now. And everything used to come in cages and be delivered at the back of the shop. Nothing went through the front of the shop at all. And that's just a view out of the window itself, as I say, looking down the high street.
Which actually doesn't look that different from today.
No. Okay.
Maybe more cars. And
yes,
then
absolutely.
one, I thought maybe you could tell us, you must remember this, looks like a very snowy winter.
Yes. I can't remember the exact date, but it was obviously in the 60s, and it was chaos because we couldn't get a delivery van to the shop at all. And we ran the back of the shop, there was a reasonably large storage area, but it was also the butchery area. So that's where they butchered everything and they stored everything. So everything was done not quite just in time as they do it these days, but you didn't have a huge amount of space for storage. So we found it very difficult, and we found it difficult to keep the shop stocked those particular days where it was very, very icy and snowy. Most of the stores and stock came from Basingstoke in Hampshire, where they had a big depot. Basingstoke, Buntingford were the 2 big depots in my day. There's one at Charlton in London as well. And I spent some time in those depots learning the business of how you get the stock from the warehouse to the shop. And part of the training that you undergo is, as an A-level trainee, is to go around all the depots and also the slaughterhouse in Haverhill in Suffolk, which was a life-enhancing experience if you're not used to slaughterhouses. And I remember there going, because I was responsible for taking students around the slaughterhouse. And of course, the operatives in the slaughterhouse used to enjoy this quite a lot, because they would slide some innards of some poor creature across the floor towards the students that I was taking around to show them around the slaughterhouse. And a few of them would sort of faint and fall over, which the operatives quite enjoyed. I think the thing about a slaughterhouse is the stench of it. It's quite extraordinary. So as part of the A-level training course, you had to do all these things because you had to, when you got to a position in life where you moved up the ladder in Sainsbury's, you had to say, well, I've actually done that. I know what I'm doing. I've been to a slaughterhouse, I've been to a warehouse, I've been to a production centre, I've been to a pork pie factory, etc., etc. So they give you really good training, and even if you're just, as I was, a learner in the retail shop in counter service, you had to learn everything there was to learn about shops, and it was great fun. Lots of good friends made and good friendships kept.
Thank you, Simon. That was a really interesting insight into it. I think the hostel thing I find really interesting, that they put you up and looked after you, and you really did sort of live above the shop.
Absolutely.
I've asked a few questions. You certainly asked some of the things I was interested in. Would anyone else like to ask something? If you would, you can either type it into the chat or just unmute yourself and ask a question. Alison's got her hand up first. So,
yeah, thank you, Simon. That was really interesting. Something that I've heard, and I'm not sure if it was at Sainsbury's or one of the other shops, was there used to be a payment system of those tubes up above the head where you'd put receipts in and it'd all fly through to the cashier. Was that in Sainsbury's?
We didn't have it in Amersham, no, but they did have it in head office for sending stuff between floors with the tubes. And of course, they used them in a lot of department stores as well, but not as I recall anyway, in the Amersham branch did we have those tubes. But it was really too small a branch to be able to justify something quite like that. I then moved on after, just a quick follow-on on that, I then moved on after my training to become a junior buyer in Sainsbury's, and I was responsible for buying canned goods, confectionery and soft drinks. And again, the training was extraordinary. The thing about Sainsbury's was they had these very strict rules about you had to wear a suit always if you're a buyer, because you were the sort of face of the company back into the supply chain. And I used to remember going into the buying department in Blackfriars, and everyone wear suits, but the older boys wear suits with patches on their arms and patches around their cuffs. I remember a friend of mine, I think his name was Alan Chant, came in and he said he came in an immaculate blazer, immaculate trousers with seam, strong seams and everything else, and polished shoes. He got told off, got told to go back to his house and wear a suit rather than a blazer. So they were very strict about things like that.
Thank you. Thanks, Alison. Jill, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah. I have done that.
Yeah.
So I've been told what to do. Hi, Simon. Really good to see you.
Hello, Jill.
I remember the tiles in Sainsbury's were sort of cream, and they had beautiful green and gold writing on. And so when Starbucks moved in, I don't know how many years ago that was, where Harrison Hall is now, all that beautiful, all those beautiful tiles or some of them were exposed for the first time in decades.
Yeah.
I remember lots of mahogany, lots of polished brass, and it was. I don't think my memory is playing tricks on me there, but it really was a beautiful store. I mean, I was only small. Sorry, I'm not suggesting you're that much older, but I've got those memories. But I used to work in Lipton's or the Maypole further along the road as a Saturday job, and I think Sainsbury's was a much better place to work. You had much higher standards.
What is interesting in those, you make a good point there. What was interesting in those days was that wherever Sainsbury's went and plonked themselves in a shopping centre, others would follow. I'm not sure that's the case now, but they were definitely leaders. If you found a Sainsbury's in a for example, a bigger town, other shops would really want to be with you, and the other spaces around the Sainsbury's store would definitely be acquired very quickly by others who wanted to be there. So they set really high standards, and it was a privilege to work there because you learned a huge amount about how to run a business properly, how to do it properly. You talked about the mahogany and the brass. That had to be cleaned on a regular basis by all of us. And, we were inspected as trainees by Mr. Chapman, the manager, to make sure we had a white shirt, black trousers, polished shoes. Even though nobody could see your shoes or your trousers, we wore white aprons, white tunics with double-breasted black buttons down the side, and aprons. And that was, you had to have them absolutely immaculate. If you spilt blood on anything, or you had to change your outfit for some reason, it was insisted upon that you did it, because the face to the customer had to be clean, tidy, and efficient.
That's interesting. Things have changed, haven't they, a little bit?
Just a bit.
Does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask Simon? Oh, Alison's got another one. Let's just see if anyone else has their hand up first, Alison. I don't think so. Quite a few people have got their camera off. What would you like to ask?
Sorry to hog you, Simon, but I'm fascinated by the idea that you had at the hostel that you had a housekeeper. So did she wash your aprons if you got blood on them? Were they?
I was going to ask that.
There was a laundry system for everything that was done. We had to wash our own clothes, so and we went down to the laundrette. I think it was in Hill Avenue at the time to do that ourselves. But she looked after us as far as meals were concerned, and the bedrooms were concerned, and everything else. And she was like a mother hen. She was wonderful. I wish I could remember her name, but she really looked after us. And when you're a youngster just heading away from home, and in my case, a reasonable distance, it's nice to know that you were welcomed and looked after. She was quite strict, but she really looked after you. And the hostels were basic, but they were, perfectly adequate for a young man in my position in those days, starting out on his career. I expected to be with Sainsbury's for the rest of my career. Excuse me, as one did in the 1960s. You started one company, it was a good company, worked up through it and everything else. But it so happened that one day at Sharplayer's Cricket Club, a well-known Amersham cricket club, I was serving a pint of Watney's Red Barrel over the bar to the captain of the second 11, who said, "Do you want a job?" And I said, "Do I look that desperate?" He said, No, I'm starting a commodity trading company. Do you want to join me?" So I left Sainsbury's in 71 to join the commodity trading company, an international company but based in Loss and Aylesbury. And about a month or so afterwards, I was having a reunion with one of my ex-Sainsbury colleagues rather, and he said, "Did you know that you were on the shortlist to be one of the PAs for J.D. Sainsbury, who was the chairman at the time?" I said, "No, I had no idea about that at all." So it's funny how life takes you and career changes take place. I've been a buyer for Sainsbury's, I've been a commodity trader, I've sold photocopies for a life-enhancing time of my life, I've sold dealing systems in the City of London, I worked for BT, sat on BT's South East Regional Board, and then ran a bed and breakfast. So I've done all sorts of things. And when I started out in 1967, I thought, this is going to be my life, working for Sainsbury's. And it would have been a good life too. They really looked after their staff. They had a J Sainsbury, they called them JS Veterans Association. And they kept people going with a whole lot of activities, both whilst you were working there and also afterwards as well. They were very, very good at looking after themselves.
Thank you, Simon. That's been so interesting. Jill, you want to ask one more thing?
A quick question. I was trying to remember when Amersham Sainsbury's closed, because I know it's when the self-service supermarket here at Sainsbury's in Chesham opened, but my memory is hazy on that one.
I don't know the exact date. Alison, I don't know if you know. No, I thought that actually before we came on to do this afternoon, I thought I must check, but I actually don't know that we've got it recorded. I know so I don't know.
I'm guessing around 1970 odd.
I would have thought so, because some of the self-service supermarkets predate that anyway, I think. So yeah, it's just that the one hadn't come here. So I'm sure we can find out.
On your site, there's a chap whose name I can't remember, who worked for Sainsbury's for 30 years, and he talks about 1970 that he worked in the Amersham Sainsbury's branch. So it would have been sometime shortly after that, I would think. I can't remember.
The question, can we just for that, Val?
Yeah. Hello, Simon.
Hello.
Simon, it's Jen and Val Russell. Nice to see you again.
And you.
Simon, what was the sort of competition? I mean, you talked about Lipton's, and were there a lot of independent butchers and things in the town at the time?
Yes, there were. I think there was a Dewhurst. Was it a Dewhurst or one of the stores anyway? Like that was an independent butcher, and of course you had in Chesham Boys, you had the wonderful butchers there, which we used a lot over the years. So yes, there were competitors, but I think a lot of people found that they could socialize in Sainsbury's as well. It was a sort of almost like a club. And if you were a Sainsbury supporter, you didn't generally go to any other of these other stores because Sainsbury's looked after you. And I think that was one of the reasons that people went there. Certainly, my wife Mary's mother shopped at her mother shopped at Sainsbury's all the time, because she felt, if there was a problem, she could get it solved, and there was no issue about it. They would just make sure that she was looked after. And she shopped there for years and years and years. I may well have met my present wife with her mother in the shop, and I never knew about it. We'll never know to this day.
Well, thank you again, Simon. One thing I've got, if you'd like to sort of find out more about Sainsbury's, I've just I looked and brought up the page for the Sainsbury's archive, which is online. Hopefully you can see that. And you can put in Amersham. There's this photo here of what Sainsbury's looked like. They financed the whole block of 9 buildings, and then they put their shop there in the middle. and that's photos from 1937. But these are just the search results I did for Sainsbury's. So there's some staff members from earlier eras. They do look incredibly smart, look with their suits on underneath their aprons. And then there is an actual file, a branch file review that you can look at and bring up. So I'm going to see if I can make an appointment to see that. But they're the only pictures I think you can look at. And then there's some journals and things like that. So if you just put sainsburysarchive.org.uk in, and then you do a search for Sainsbury's, you should be able to find that. So thank you again, Simon. Really appreciate that. We're going to move on now to Alison, who's going to tell us a little bit about or highlight some of the architectural details of the shops in Amersham on the Hill.
So I just wanted to just show you a sort of few early photos, and then again, as they look like today, and they're mainly photos of Kennard buildings, because as most of you know from other talks, he's our sort of preeminent arts and craft architect. And these are the very first shops that were built in the new town on the hill. And it's interesting, they're sort of below the railway and looking down towards the old town. So obviously the initial thought was that all the development would take place between the railway and the original market town. But actually most of the development ends up above the railway, north of the railway. Where I guess it's because it's flatter ground and less hilly and not so many challenges for the building. But this was the very first one. And as you can see, they've got the shops below and the housing above, with rather lovely doors onto roof terraces, because of course the road was so much quieter. Today I don't think you'd want your roof terrace there. And this is what it looks like today. And there is still an original door on there. Don't know if you can see my cursor showing it, but the windows have changed a lot. But the basic building is still there, looking a bit sad. And of course the railway, the extra line was added, so it encroaches much closer to the original building, but it's still there. And then looking at it from the other angle, you've still got some rather lovely features on there as well, these beautiful green tiles. And every time we do the talks and walks around Amersham on the Hill, someone always says something like they've lived here for 30 years and never noticed those tiles. And they're still there, so you know, do look at them, they're rather lovely. And Oakville Corner. Now this one, as anyone that knows me knows, this is a sort of an issue. This is an early photo. I'm sorry, not great quality there, but it's when Kennard's brother had the chemist shop in the middle and the entrance in the middle. I guess that was lost to give a bigger window display, and also perhaps it was considered slightly dangerous to come straight onto the corner there. But that's what it used to look like when it was originally built, and rather a fine building. And this photo I took last year, and I think it's deteriorated even more since then. And I think there's a real case now that we ought to try and get this building listed. We have now found out who the landlord is, the Amersham Action Group that Ron is a part of. With Jane Barnes as now, we've discovered who the landlord is. And Jane wants to sort of contact him softly, or the company softly, and point out that they really should be doing more to upgrade the building. But I think if we got it listed, then the landlord does have an obligation then to do some restoration work. And it really is kind of like the entrance point to our shopping area as you're driving into the town. I think it's such a shame that it's looking so sad and uncared for at the moment. From this angle, it's not on all sides. I guess perhaps different owners own different parts, but it's really the black wooden timber detailing that really needs paint and a bit of TLC. I think it'd be a real tragedy if that was, you know, demolished. It's not listed, there's nothing to stop it being demolished, and it would completely alter the whole look of Amersham. More Kennard shops up the side from Chesham Road. Again, I think these look quite contemporary, these buildings today. I don't think we realise how early they are. It dates back to 1912. See the Hovis sign on there. I've got an even earlier photo when it was first built. If you look in the distance there, it's the same view, perhaps slightly clearer photo. But can you see the houses here going down Hill Avenue? And that really shows me how much the town developed as this mix of shops and housing. And you know, today, you know, the view is completely built up, you know, with the entertainer opposite. And these buildings still look, you know, very modern considering how early they were built. Another feature here to point out, typical Kennard feature, these brick pillars, which we get repeated again and again. And you can see it here on the right-hand side, close up with a rather lovely original door as well. So that's all there in that building, lots of touches. Another Kennard block, so this is going back down Sycamore Road towards Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's, I'm not sure if it's built on this picture, but it's sort of there. And you can still see the cinema in the background. And again, this building looks very, almost exactly the same today, and is in a much better condition, I think, than Oakfield Corner. You can see one of the brick pillars has been covered up by the shop front there, but it's still there underneath. But from the first floor up, it looks very similar. And I think when you're walking around Amersham, do make sure you look up. I think we're very good at running down Amersham on the Hill, but there's actually some really fine buildings underneath all there. And across the road, of course, I think it's one of the nicest buildings, which was Napier's, and then Woodcock's. Of course, Woodcock's very important to Amersham Museum, as Tony Woodcock's left us such an important legacy. But look at these beautiful round windows up above. There's a close-up there of what it looks like today, but again, it's all a bit sad. It needs a bit of TLC. And this rather lovely arch, which when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, there must have been a door there, but there never was a door. That was always a sort of architectural detail and a feature. And we even know who the master bricklayer was who did that sort of fine work. He was showing off his own bricklaying abilities there. His bungalow on Holloway Lane has the same features. So I think that's rather fine. Front, of course, this is what it looks like today with that lovely shop front gone, with the EEBT phone shop there now. But if you look up, you've still got these windows in all their glory and that lovely arch. And from the front, photos I took last year, obviously early in the morning to try and get the less cars around, but then you've got the shutters. But you can see up above, again, they're rather nice arts and craft details. Kennard, these two, and then we've got, we think these are probably Swannell and Sly designed ones. But if you look at amidst all the different buildings on Amersham the Hill, we have got some really lovely arts and craft ones. The Pizza Express one, I think, is particularly fine, with the lovely brick detailing, and that's probably Swannell and Sly, built by Ruston Radcliffe, who were Cheshire builders who built a lot of Amersham on the Hill and Cheshire boys. But those were the ones I wanted to show you, just to highlight some of these lovely shops that we've got in Amersham on the Hill, and that we need to be bigging them up a bit more, really, and trying to encourage the landlords to be restoring them as well. So anyone got any questions for us on those? Or any stories you want to share about your shopping memories as well? Because Jill, you gave us a great revelation there that you used to work at the Maypole.
Got some pictures of
you.
I can go on to that if you want to and show my pictures too, and then perhaps people could chip in. So I have got some pictures I've got a mixture of lots of pictures of some of the things people have mentioned in the chat, but we were given a set of photographs, which this is one of the first, just before lockdown towards the end of 2019, by a local person. That they didn't know the exact date, so that might be part of the fun, is trying to work out. They thought 1960s, but Maypole is in these. So there's a lovely mixture of locations. This is obviously the High Street in Amersham. There's Haddon's, the chemist, on the left, which I'm sure many of you know well. And in our collection, we have many of the items that were sold there. It was a chemist and an optometrist, so we have all of the glasses that we use for trying on and measuring people's eyesight, as well as lots of the bottles, which are all highly poisonous, that we use to make medicine. And there, obviously, there's the museum there on the right, which was an antique shop at this time, and then I think that's probably still the post office, the other part that's now the museum. And then there's some pictures of Amersham on the Hill. So I really like this one, super picture to give you a great view of the High Street. I think that's Noble, but I'm not quite sure the first one, maybe someone could say. There's Woolworths, there's Dewhurst the Butchers. Brownings is one lots of people talk about, which was just here. And then that will go on to Mr. Plummer the greengrocer, Woodcock's, and then further on. But I can come back to these if people have got things they want to say. And then this is the view from the other side. So just cutting out Sainsbury's on the left. But there's the cleaners, and there's Ron Haddock's little shop. Now, there was a debate actually in the museum the other day about whether photographs or photograph and music. We thought they sold records at the back. We always have, but someone else said they didn't remember that. There's the baby bar, and then there's a few more shops that go along, and there is the maypole there on the end. Another nice view from another side. Again, unfortunately, Sainsbury's is covered up by the van, but there's Darvel and Sons. And that's London Key, oh, I don't know what that is, kiosk, maybe that's a photography shop. But one of the things I really noticed when I looked at these is the style of shop fronts, how they all had that lovely kind of walk-in glass front, and then you'd go down into the doorway, which has been lost, and how many of them have blinds as well, like Simon mentioned. And then this last one from that collection is Little Chalfont. And so that's the road coming as though you've come from Chorley Wood, going back through Little Chalfont. So it's quite interesting to see, particularly this part on the left, which is now the BW bit, I think, how that's changed. And then just these are a couple of earlier photos because I thought it would get mentioned. That's a Woodcocks. And there's Mr. Plummer's, the greengrocers to the left. So he was there for a long time. He was also the local head of the local fire brigade. So it's interesting to hear that Mr. Chapman at Sainsbury's was that later on. But I always think that photo is so lovely. Look for those beautiful pyramids of fruit all stacked up and flowers next to it. It just looks absolutely lovely. And then there's one of Browning's, again, because I've probably showed you a better one, but people do always talk about it. So there are a few to show you. I don't know if anyone's got comments or things they remember about those, or I can bring one of the pictures back up if anyone has a story. I'm sure between you do, and there's definitely things that we haven't mentioned or places and people that are here who have memories. I can see Sue's here. She's told us lots of times about the dairy on Hill Avenue. So I don't know if anyone would like to share a story.
Sorry, I don't mean to hog it, but London Kiosk, as a child, I can only remember it as a sweet shop, but then I wasn't interested in anything else. But we used to buy little trays of toffee that came with a little hammer that we used to have to break up. And Lipton's, well, Maypole, I used to work in there, and then it became Lipton's. And I can remember being on the cheese counter. Now, we weren't given any training, we just sort of let loose with these deathly machines that used to have to slice things up. But I can remember if the cheese was mouldy, you had to slice it off, and slice the mould off, and you chuck that away, and then you just put the slab of cheese back on the counter. And if it's a bit dried up, you had to slice the dried up bits off, put them in a box, and then grate them up, and you sold that as grated cheese. It was a bit disgusting. And then we all had barcodes now, where you had a gun with a price labelling gun that you stuck the labels on, and if the prices changed, you had to peel the labels off and stick new labels on, which was great fun during decimalisation. No, that was a total pain. No, there's all sorts of little things keep popping into my head, but let's say I'm hogging it, so I won't carry on too long.
Jill, is there anywhere you mentioned about the toffee? Is there any shop that you remember, sort of you particularly enjoyed going to, or
Kiosk, because that was the best one, because you had we had toffee from there. And I'll rack my brains and have a think. I haven't got any photos, I'm afraid, but certainly. And you were talking about recycling and so on, and how sustainable we were. I used to work on the till at Lipton's as well, and used to have collect. The worst bit was getting the Ribena and the Lucozade bottles, because there was a penny or a halfpenny back on those or something, and you had to store them underneath the till until they were collected, and that was rather always a sticky job to deal with those.
Oh, so that's good. I didn't realise they did that. So you did do a bottle collection.
Yeah, but it was only certain brands. But I certainly remember Ribena and Lucozade. Yeah. And I can't remember much else. Let somebody else have a go while I have a little think.
Thank you. Who else would like to tell us something? I'm sure someone would.
I would if I could, but I can't get there.
Oh, well, tell us now, Anne. You put it in the chat.
Sorry. Now I've forgotten what. Now I'll think about it. If you can hear me, that's fine. Yeah.
In the chat, you mentioned about another shop. We haven't showed a picture of, the international stores as a competitor.
Yes. Yes.
What do you remember about that?
Well, the international grocery store was near to where the estate agent is, towards Oakfield Corner, and that was just grocery, and you sat by the counter and the person took your order. And the greengrocery, I would think, was on the other side of the road.
Yes.
And there was a fish shop between Dewhurst and Brownings.
Oh, right.
John 18.
Fish.
And also one in Hill Avenue.
Yes, I knew there was one in Hill Avenue.
Box. Yes.
And do you remember anywhere you particularly like going then? Do you remember?
Well, I used to live over Freeman, Hardy and Willis, which is next to, well, there was Myers, the greengrocer, and then Freeman, Hardy and Willis. Myers was the other side of Sainsbury's. So I lived in the Chiltern Parade.
Ah, right, yes. So which is the name of that block of shops? If I go back to...
It's on the other side. It's Chiltern Parade. It's the other side of the road.
Yeah, I wonder if we've got the picture of it.
It's the one where we're hit. And actually, you talked about Nobles.
Was it next to Marvels?
Yeah, next to Darvels, to the right of Darvels.
Yeah,
is Freeman Hardy. That's where I lived, because my father was the manager of the shoe shop.
Oh, right.
And you talked about the Chapman at the fire station, but Nobles was the fire station.
Oh, right. Oh, I didn't know that. Let's go back.
And the Siren, when it was on Sycamore Corner. So if we were in church, everybody had to stop because you couldn't hear yourself think because of the siren going off.
Oh, that's interesting. I've just noticed, look, in that Woolworths picture, there's a pram out there.
Yes. Oh, yeah, we left our children outside. And then walked away and forgot where you left them.
So were the international stores, was that when Sainsbury's was there? They were very close to each other.
Yeah, there were two. I can't place in. I know it's further down towards the cancer research shop.
Yeah, I know where you mean.
Yes, that was the grocers. Oh, and I think the greengrocers was next door to it. Yes, it was. Yeah, what is now the estate agents.
Right. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. What else did you, and you mentioned Kingham's, didn't you? I'm sure we have a photo of that. That was at the other end of Sycamore Road, I thought.
Grimstall's Corner, yes.
Mm.
Yes.
And that was a grocer, wasn't it? Or a greengrocer, I think.
That was a grocer.
Mm.
And they also had another shop in Hill Avenue.
Right.
Nearer to the post office.
Right. Oh, thank you. And we'll have to, if you're willing, we'll have to talk to you outside of this session.
Yes, right. I'm quite willing, yes.
And that would be brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything they want to tell us? I know, Sue, I see that you're here. I don't know if you'll tell us anything about the dairy. No, you don't have to. No, okay. Maybe another time.
Ron has a question, I think.
Oh, okay, sorry. Go ahead, Ron.
Not a question, just a comment of what I remember from the 70s, when you're going into the shops, the pride, the sense of pride in working in the shops. They made you welcome and they knew their products. Yeah, of course, and now it's all changed. It's all different.
I think that really comes across from what Simon said, doesn't it? You know, the sort of the standards that were expected of the staff are very high, and they're also trained a lot. You know, poor Jill saying she was thrown behind the cheese counter with, you know, no training. So definitely, I suppose the way working in shops has changed quite a lot. but yeah, no, it was definitely more of an outing, I think, to go to some shops, wasn't it? You know, quite special in some ways. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to share with us? We haven't touched much on Little Chalfont or Amersham Old Town. I don't know if anyone has anything about there they'd like to tell us about. Nothing?
You can't hear.
Emily, all the shopping we did was very local. We didn't travel to, you know, I was born in Amersham, lived in Amersham on the Hill, and we shopped locally generally. We did, because there was the range of shops in Amersham. Why would you go to Little Chalfont and or Old Amersham? You didn't need to.
No, that's amazing, isn't it? I know some people in the past have told me stories about exactly that. One lady I interviewed in Chesham not that long ago said exactly she'd get everything from Chesham, and things were still, quite a few things were still delivered to home. But that once a year they'd go into London on the train to buy her children some clothes, and that would be that would be almost like a Christmas trip to do this sort of something completely different. But that was it. Apart from that, you never ever left where you lived. Oh, I can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, no, sorry. Nobody's mentioned not Drazzles on the corner where Boots is now, and that was a huge place. We used to go in there and used to buy everything at a different counter, and there's a lady in the kiosk that you paid at the end, and I think they had a tube system.
What shop was that?
Drazzles. It was Butcher's on the corner where Boots the chemist now is.
All right, let's see if we can see that in the pictures.
And it was, they had the a slaughterhouse down in Old Amersham.
Oh, so that was the Basil shop.
Yeah. So they had this big slaughterhouse in Old Amersham where Tesco's now is. And we lived at the top of Stanley Hill. And if the wind was in the wrong direction, or in the right direction, I suppose, you knew when they were boiling kidneys, was taking kidney pie, and you could stand it from there. And Roger Pusey, who used to run Mayo's in Cheshire Boys, started his working career at the slaughterhouse in Old Amersham before he moved to Stephen's Butchers in Old Amersham.
All right. We have some equipment from the slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
Acquisitions means but actually in lockdown we were sent a piece of film that someone, when Bowyer's closed, they had been involved in kind of closing it all up, and before Tesco was built, and they found this film in a skip, and then years later kept it, decided to look at it, and kindly in lockdown digitized it and sent it to us. And it's almost like a Brazzell's promotional film, and it's absolutely brilliant. So it starts and you see all the lorries going into the cattle being delivered to the slaughterhouse down in Old Amersham. You see edited parts of the process, and then you see all these ladies wearing no kind of health and safety equipment making sausages, and then it's brilliant. And then you see it being delivered to the shop in Amersham on the Hill, and I kept meaning to check actually where it was. So you've answered that question. You can see all the food being delivered and displayed in the shop, and at the end of the video there's this very old-fashioned image of a lady cooking dinner and putting it on the table, and a gentleman coming home from work in his suit and eating his sausages. So it's brilliant. We're going to hopefully use it as part of this exhibition we're doing about kind of shopping and sustainability. But you know, these things are there almost, you know, pictures or video or things that people have, but unfortunately people just don't generally take pictures of the insides of shops unless, like Anne's mentioned, someone has a connection, you know, a family connection or something. So and most of the pictures we've shown you have been donated recently. So anything that people have, you know, any stories people have or shop pictures or would be great. Linda, who's on the call, one of the things she's doing as part of the project is to try to photograph all the shops as they are today. And if we keep doing that every few years, we'd have a really good record going forward of what they all look like, not just the architecture like Alison pointed out, but the different shops. And you know, even in the 10 years I've lived here, it's changed an awful lot. So, and I think it is something that, you know, the way the shops that are demanded, the things that people want to shop for, and also how the high street changes is really interesting. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say or add? Or
my elderly neighbour of mine once said, you talked about the cattle coming in by lorry. He talked about the pigs coming in by train and being herded down Station Road to their doom. Poor things.
I've heard that story too. But it's amazing to think that happened, really, isn't it? You know. Thanks, Teresa. Would anyone else like to add anything? I'm just checking. I don't think so. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So do look out for our exhibition. It should be, we hope to launch it in November, and it will look at shopping and kind of characters that worked in shops, as well as these sort of themes about packaging and sustainability. It will either be in our pop-up van, Anthony, our mobile museum, or it might be in maybe a location in Amersham on the Hill. We're working on that at the moment. So thank you for joining us, and as I say, do share anything that you want to about shops. Just email me otherwise if you don't want to do it after the call. And next month, I think it's the 20th, the next one, is going to be, Alison's going to be hosting that one, and we have a few people. We did one for Refugee Week in June about people with stories of either accommodating refugees or being refugees themselves, and we've had a few more people kind of come forward and want to share their own stories, so we're going to do another session on that. So please do join us, some really interesting stories. Thanks everyone, thanks for joining us on a very sunny afternoon, and hope to see you soon.